The story unfolds approximately 13 to 14 years ago at a temple in Phra Nakhon Si Ayutthaya province. During a summer break, a young man, then 13 or 14 years old, was ordained as a novice monk, as was customary for many young men in Thailand. There were over 70 novices ordained at the same time, and due to their large numbers, they all slept together in the temple hall. The first 2 days of his ordination passed without incident, filled with routine monastic activities like walking meditation and listening to Dharma. On the third day, the temple was thrown into a state of disarray by 2 unexpected events. First, a body was brought to the temple for a funeral ceremony, but the gravedigger, a crucial figure for conducting the necessary rites, could not be found. This left the temple scrambling to find a substitute to perform the rituals. The second complication arose because the hall where the many novices slept was now needed for the funeral ceremony. Consequently, the novices had to be relocated, dispersed among the monks' living quarters. The young novice and 4 of his friends, a total of 5, were assigned to sleep in the temple's chapel. This was quite unusual, as monks typically do not reside in the chapel itself. But in this particular temple, a monk did live there. The first night sleeping in the chapel, the third night of his ordination, passed without any unusual occurrences. However, the second night spent in the chapel brought a terrifying experience. Late that night, the young novice was hit with an urgent need to use the restroom. The closest one was a considerable distance away, past the temple's crematorium and the hall. He tried to wake his 4 friends, but they remained asleep, leaving him no choice but to venture out alone. As he walked alone, passing the crematorium, he admits he was incredibly scared. Approaching the hall, he heard sounds of people making a commotion on the elevated structure. He initially thought it was people gambling, a common sight during temple events in rural areas, and decided to use the hall's restrooms, which he presumed would be open. The hall had a specific layout, an elevated structure with 2/3 of its space dedicated to ceremonies, and a back section with a wall separating the kitchen and restrooms. He made his way to the back, climbed the stairs, and immediately saw 3 restrooms in a row. The first stall's door was closed, the third was uncertain, but the middle one was open, so he entered. These were squat toilets, flush with the ground. As he sat, he began to hear unsettling sounds from the first stall, the one to his left. First, he detected the unmistakable smell of cigarette smoke. Then came the chilling sound, someone hawking phlegm onto the cement floor, followed by the distinctive scrape of a shoe rubbing it away. This disturbing sequence repeated itself 3 or 4 times. Despite the strangeness, he initially felt a fleeting sense of relief, thinking he wasn't alone. When he finished, he realized There was no dipper for rinsing. He knocked on the wall of the first stall and politely asked to borrow one, expecting it to be slid under the partition as there was a shared water channel connecting the stalls. The other stall fell silent. Then a sound emerged from behind him. He turned around to see a withered, dark hand reaching through the small gap of the water channel, holding the dipper and tapping the wall. He also noticed a red plaid shirt sleeve extending far down the arm, almost to the elbow, indicating an unnaturally long reach. Though startled, he instinctively thanked the unseen individual, took the dipper, and used it. Afterward, he returned the dipper and splashed water into the channel, assuming the other person might need it. As he exited the restroom, he glanced at the first stall, expecting the person to have finished, but the door remained closed. What struck him with a sudden jolt of fear was something he hadn't noticed before. A U-shaped metal bar, about a palm's length, was hooked through the door hinge, effectively locking the stall from the outside. He hadn't seen it when he entered. Despite the rising dread, his fear of the crematorium urged him to hurry back to the chapel, where he quickly went to sleep. He was abruptly awakened later that morning by a commotion, people shouting, "Found him! Found him!" His novice friends pulled him along, and they followed the commotion, which led them back to the hall, specifically to the entrance of the very restroom he had used hours earlier. A crowd had gathered in front of the first stall, the one he had encountered. Pushing through the onlookers, he finally reached the front and looked inside the first restroom stall. What he saw sent a shockwave through him, making his heart pound and his ears ring. An elderly man was sitting on the squat toilet, his legs stretched towards the door. His body slumped back against the water basin, and his head submerged face down in the water. The most horrifying detail was that his neck was nearly severed, almost decapitated. The entire restroom floor was covered in blood, but it was dry and almost black, indicating that the death had not occurred recently. He later learned the devastating truth. The victim was wearing knee-length shorts and a red plaid shirt, the same type of shirt he had glimpsed on the withered arm that offered him the dipper. The deceased was none other than the gravedigger, the very man who had been missing since the previous day. He had been murdered by having his throat slit, and, shockingly, he had been dead for approximately 3 days. This meant the gravedigger had been deceased before the young novice had even begun his ordination. The most perplexing detail for the young novice was the complete absence of any foul odor from the decomposing body when he was in the adjacent stall, only the lingering smell of cigarette smoke. The image of the withered hand reaching through the narrow gap to offer him the dipper remains vivid in his memory to this day, a testament to the sheer terror of that night. Later, the police apprehended the perpetrator, a local teenager who had been attempting to steal from the temple's donation box in the hall. It was believed the gravedigger had stumbled upon the theft and was murdered to silence him. The killer was arrested around the 10th day of the novice's 15-day ordination. This encounter was the first truly frightening experience of the young man's life, leaving an indelible mark on his memory.